Welcome back to the Basketball Show. I'm your host, Paul Sir, and I am so pleased to be joined by Pat Boylan, the play-by-play voice of both the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever of the WNBA. Pat, thanks so much for making time today.
Hey, it's good to be back with you. I appreciate the invite.
So, Pat, the Pacers come through a five-game series with Milwaukee. They had their way with the Bucks. But talk about the last game. It really was historic, somewhat hysterical, and filled with, I think, a combination of drama and soap opera outcomes. Talk about the last game.
Yeah, Game 5, I haven't personally seen anything quite like that. I've been with the franchise for 11 years now. I grew up here, so I was born in 1990, and my childhood was Reggie Miller. So I know all about Pacers playoff heroic moments and comebacks and all of that, but I haven't seen anything quite like that. You know, when Gary Trent Jr. was just going bonkers, and at one point the Milwaukee lead was 7 with 40 seconds to go, that's not literally unsurmountable, but especially in the playoffs when you're taking on good teams. And, you know, sometimes weirdness happens in the regular season that when teams are 100% locked in, you just don't see it in the playoffs. Look, I don't want to say I didn't think the Pacers were capable or had any chance, but my mind had already turned to Game 6 in Milwaukee. And, you know, all of a sudden a couple things go your way. AJ Green misses a free throw, so instead of an 8-point game, it's a 7-point game. And then, you know, really just a couple of understated plays that the Pacers don't even have a chance to consider a comeback win without. And one of them was Canadian Andrew Nembhard, after that missed free throw, stepped into like a 30-footer and just drilled it. And he misses that shot, it's game over. It's a 7-point game, you know, with 35 seconds left or so, and Milwaukee's going back to the free throw line to make it an 8 or 9-point game. It's over. So if he misses that shot, we're talking about Game 6 happening on Friday night in Milwaukee. And then just a couple of wild plays, and one involving Nembhard again. He comes up with a steal on Gary Trent Jr.'s bad pass on the following possession. Halliburton gets an and one, and all of a sudden it's a 1-point game, but still you're down one without the ball. And with 15 seconds or so left, you know, you still probably lose in that scenario 90% of the time. But Gary Trent Jr. had his Bill Buckner moment. The ball went through his legs. You know, it's just an insane overtime for him where he hit 4 threes, looked like he won the game for Milwaukee, and then made the two, worst plays of the night with 2 turnovers, and then the Halliburton winner on the lay-in. And, you know, I was walking over to do the post-game interview, and my head was spinning. And I've never had a moment like that where my head was just like, it was like I couldn't see straight, because it was just so surreal. The game was over. Game 6 was, you know, in my mind, a foregone conclusion. And all of a sudden, in a matter of 2 to 3 real-time minutes, the Pacers had not just won the game, but, you know, Paul, the craziness of it was just the finality of it, too, because you see crazy finishes from time to time, but that crazy finish, and then that ends Milwaukee's series, and the Pacers are moving on, and all of that, you know, just kind of coming together within a few seconds was just, it was so wild to experience. It's been a few days since that game, but, you know, I'm still having trouble describing and finding the correct words to describe it, but it's one of those reasons why you love sports, right? I mean, we love it because you just never know what's going to happen. It's not scripted, and that was a late comeback for the ages for the Pacers on Tuesday.
Comeback for the ages. Here's a stat: since 1997, teams that have been down 7 with 40 seconds to go are 0 and 1,609.
I did see that. Yes.
That's an unbelievable stat, which I think frames the significance of this victory, this seemingly impossible, and to have all of those things happening within that time frame, it just was remarkable, because as I was following it online, and I saw where they were down, and I was thinking, that's over. Then you go, click. Oh my goodness, this is getting interesting. And of course, going back and watching it now, this isn't without its controversy. And I think this has been there have been many things that I think, Pat, have marked these playoffs, this first round of a really interesting playoff series. But one of the areas has been the NBA admitting its mistakes. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this, because the NBA, as they've done in other situations, came out and said AJ Green did not commit the foul on Halliburton. It shouldn't have been an and one. And that would have been hugely significant in the outcome and the scenario that you painted before. Now, whether or not it was a foul, and because even last night watching a call reversal in the Knicks Pistons game, where I thought clearly Brunson, the clutch of all clutch players, has a call reversed. Is it a good thing, A, to have the replays where they're reversing foul calls now, understanding that the intent is to get it right, but B, when they do miss it in critical situations, and this is one of 2 or 3 really critical game-changing situations, is it good for the NBA to come out and say, you know what, we blew it?
Yeah, it's a $1 million question, and there's a lot of angles you can take on this. And yes, I have my own thoughts, which are, I personally don't think it does the NBA a whole lot of good, especially in the AJ Green situation, to come out with this, because what invariably happens is, look, basketball, in my opinion, is the toughest sport to officiate. And what I'm about to say here, I would feel the exact same way if the role were reversed in a situation like this. The refs in the final 5 minutes or the final 2 minutes, have to make endless calls, have to make 100 different calls over the course of, the final 2 minutes and overtime. And for them to only quote unquote miss one is actually quite impressive. But what actually ends up happening is everybody circles one moment and they say this game could have been totally different if it was called in a different direction. And the reality of the situation is, TV broadcasts and cameras have gotten so good that we have the ability to look at 25 different angles in super slow-mo, in hyper HD, and on the 8th replay, we go, oh, wait, they got that wrong. And the 100%. Officials have one angle and one speed. And now each of these is a case-by-case scenario. I'm talking about the AJ Green call here, because to me, that's one of those where I say, look, you could do a last 2-minute report for the whole game and maybe find 15 calls that went against Indiana and 15 calls that went against Milwaukee. And so in that instance, I don't really consider that a game-changing type of call. Every once in a while, they do come up. And a great example of that would be Detroit and New York in Game 4, when there was a clear foul in the corner on, I believe, Hardaway Jr. and Josh Hart committed the foul. And that was a clear foul on a 3-point shot with the clock at 0. And he goes to the line down 1, and all he has to do is hit 2 of those 3, and then the result is literally different. To me, that's a very different scenario. And what's hard is I could talk about this with you for an hour, but what's hard is you can change called fouls, because the foul call in of itself puts a dead ball on the situation. However, you can't challenge non-called fouls, because in most situations you can't just stop the game to challenge it when there's no whistle. So that's a tough aspect of this too. And I guess just looking back at it, maybe the right move is to call it if you're not sure, is to call it a foul, and then that gives you the chance to go back and look at it and reverse that call. You can't reverse a non-call, but you can reverse a call. So it's speaking of head spinning, this topic is as well. And it's, in my opinion, in a scenario where refs, because I believe the last 2-minute report in the Pacers situation includes overtime. So you're talking 7 minutes there. If they miss one call, that's actually really good. And to me, it does the NBA no good to be spotlighting something like that. But in the situation where they miss a literal game-changing call, ball in the air, clock is at 0 or close to it in the Detroit game, that's a very different situation, and that's for people smarter than me to figure out. But you hate to have playoff games that end like Game 4 in Detroit did, that's for sure.
That is for sure. And I'm talking with Pat Boylan, the play-by-play voice of both the Indiana Fever and the Indiana Pacers here on the Basketball Show. Now, there's a lot of surreal moments in any season of any sport, but I think the NBA had an exceptional year of bizarre occurrences. The Doncic trade, on and on. But one of the things that came out towards the end of the season, and maybe it even happened in the playoffs, Pat, was The Athletic does this survey with NBA players. They poll the players on a variety of questions. I think it was 90 players. And one of the questions is, who's the most overrated player in the league? And Tyrese Halliburton is picked by a substantial margin. Now, that to me that was just strange that a reputable publication would choose to go this direction. But what I was impressed with was the way Halliburton handled it. I would say not only ignored it, but kind of rubbed everybody's face in it with a real good series, but an unbelievable last couple of minutes in this historic game. Fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, how do you counteract something like that if you want to? Well, you go make clutch play after clutch play after clutch play. And when we were going through the blow by blow of game number 5, I didn't even mention the fact that the Pacers were down 4 with 40 seconds left in regulation. So they overcame that deficit too. And how did they do that? Well, Tyrese Halliburton had the game-tying dunk to send it into overtime. He hit the first 3 to start overtime. He has the and one with AJ Green with the call that we were just talking about to pull the Pacers within 1. And then he beats Giannis, a top 5 defender in the game, to get to the rim to win the game. So you want to dispel any sort of overrated narrative. That's how you do it. And Tyrese, I'll tell you, he's a different type of player, but in a lot of ways reminds me so much of Reggie Miller because he's not afraid to talk a little trash. And people in Indianapolis love that. It's why they love Lance Stevenson. And it's not because we're a trash talking city. In fact, quite the opposite. It's a pretty humble city. But yes, with bigger markets all around us, the fan base here feels like we're forgotten about sometimes. And so when someone's willing to come here, especially like Reggie Miller and Lance Stevenson and Tyrese Halliburton, who are not from Indianapolis, and they're willing, to chirp and back the franchise in the city, the people here eat that up. And so, he deserved his moment after that. And reality on the Athletic thing, if you look at a lot of names on that list, you could say a lot of things about a lot of those guys, but overrated would not be how I would describe LeBron James or Jimmy Butler, who were also high on that list. Now, Butler, you could use a few other adjectives, but overrated would not be one of them. That's right, for sure. And, I tend to think that list is sort of a combination of a few things. One thing that I think is actually kind of significant that maybe doesn't get talked about enough as it relates to this is Tyrese Halliburton was, maybe the last guy to make Team USA on that Olympic roster. And there were a lot of guys who probably could have filled that final spot, but it was Halliburton. And I think there probably was a little bit of jealousy there. He's not afraid to trash talk. And so I think that probably didn't earn him any bonus points in this category. And he got off to a poor start to the season. And there was a lot of spotlight on his first month and a half where, frankly, he was not good. And so I think a lot of people remembered that and then didn't necessarily notice that his final 5 months of the season, he was playing at an all-NBA level. In fact, I think he's got a chance to make an all-NBA team, despite the fact that he wasn't an all-star, which is kind of crazy. So, he has totally transformed this Pacers franchise. The franchise seemed kind of rudderless for a few years there. And the Tyrese Halliburton trade instantly jettisoned the Pacers into a direction of making the playoffs. They've now won 3 playoff series each of the last 2 years. And it's not just Halliburton. There's a whole lot that goes into this and many players that are key. But Halliburton is the Pacers' best player. And in the NBA, your best player goes a long way in determining your team's level of success, and he has totally changed the fortunes of this franchise. So as far as anyone here is concerned, he can get 100% of those votes if he keeps doing what he's doing. And he had some moments that I think will make maybe some of those guys rethink that thought if this survey comes back out next year.
Luckily, they're anonymous and no different than the trolling that happens on social media. So, yeah, it was great to see that kind of response from Halliburton. I don't want to spend any time on this, but it also is demonstrative of how emotions can run so high with the confrontation of Halliburton's father with Giannis after the game, how unfortunate that is. But I have to tell you, I've seen that happen so many times at so many levels throughout my coaching and playing career, Pat, that I'm not surprised, to be honest. I'm sure everybody's disappointed, but when emotions are running that high, parents are crazy, no matter how old their kids are. And I'm speaking as a parent and how crazy I could get when my sons were playing. And so I looked at that and went, God, that's too bad. But I remember when I was coaching a local university, one of the dads coming off mad at the officials, pushed the official, banned for life from all the games. It's too bad, but it happens.
Yeah. It's, you know what, it is too bad because Tyrese Halliburton deserved, in my opinion, the conversation on Wednesday morning on all the sports talk shows to be about his heroics down the stretch. And I know his dad feels bad about that. I've had the chance to talk with John before, and let me tell you, the guy, A, has a heart of gold, and B, is just, you know, unapologetically enthusiastic and loving of his son. And he went overboard, no question. Should not have been there, no question. You know, and he will probably be the first to tell you that he deserves a reprimand that you know, might or might not be coming. And you know, he made a mistake, but to me, it's just, and I'm not surprised by this because it's just kind of the nature of the beast of talk TV and radio and where we are, where people would rather talk about something like this than the actual on-court product and what John Halliburton's son did. You know, I just wish that was the focus of all of this. And we talked Caitlin Clark and all of the theatrics about that a couple of times on your show, and just the things that are out of players' control and the things that go viral nationally that have nothing to do with basketball. That's my only slight disappointment of the way that Game 5 ended. Is I wish that there was more of a focus on everything that Halliburton and the Pacers did to close out the series, and less about a dad who had a bad moment. But look, at the end of the day, Giannis wasn't hurt. He wasn't physically hurt. John didn't do anything to him. He was he was just in a spot that he shouldn't have been. And I thought Tyrese handled it perfectly. And when we have these conversations about Caitlin, the thing I keep saying to you or whomever I'm on the air with is there's nobody that's handled any of this better than Caitlin Clark. When there are controversies surrounding her, which, by the way, never involve her. They involve everybody and outside sources, you know, taking things and pulling things and doing whatever they want to create a narrative. Well, in this situation, they didn't involve Tyrese. He didn't do anything, but I thought he handled it perfectly after the game, talking about how his dad shouldn't be there. We need to have a conversation. He apologized to Giannis, he said, and I'm sure followed through on a phone call with Giannis. And to me, that's that. The guy overstepped his boundaries and apologized, and Tyrese apologized, and hopefully that's the end of it. But yeah, you know, a unique moment for sure, and it was probably the biggest moment of Tyrese Halliburton's career. So you can understand why Dad would be proud and excited, and hopefully he's, you know, kind of learned a lesson about handling those emotions and handling things differently in the future. But I can tell you, John Halliburton, as Rick Carlisle shared afterwards, has a heart of gold and is somebody that would never do any harm intentionally. But of course, you know how you handle those type of situations is important, and hopefully that's something that will not happen again in the future.
You know, Pat, and with the experience I've had throughout my life, both as a father, a coach, coaching my sons for a lot of years, coaching a lot of other people's sons and daughters. But this is the way I explain it. When you're single or just married and you watch the behavior of parents at athletic events, you go, you know, why are they making such a big deal out of it? Then you become a parent. Everything goes out the window. It is Frankenstein's monster. You never know how parents are going to respond in certain situations, and they will have that flood of emotion that a man like John Halliburton, who, like you said, heart of gold, great guy, everybody likes him, it sounds like. He had a moment where his parental emotions take over and you become a different beast, and you do things, and afterwards you go, oh my gosh. And then when you get older and you're watching your grandkids play, you go, why was I like that? And why are those parents like it now? It all goes into, you become a Martian. You really do. And I think that's as much as needs to be said about that. And I'm talking to Pat Boylan, the play-by-play voice of the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever. Before we jump real quickly to the Fever, Pat, you have a tough series coming up against a very good Cavaliers team who had an unbelievable season that I think is fair to say exceeded everyone's preseason expectations. They just slammed Miami, which I would say of all the teams in the playoffs was the weakest team, but still they played extremely well. But talk about how the Pacers match up with the Cavs and what you're looking for from this series.
It's fascinating because the series to me couldn't feel more different than the Milwaukee series. The Milwaukee series was, you've got, in my opinion, a top 2 player in the world in Giannis, yes, and a team around him that if Giannis was not there is probably in the lottery. And
yes,
and how does all of that equate? It's tough to know, because in a playoff series, the best player, I would say, probably wins a series 75% of the time, but the Pacers had the better overall team. The Pacers had home court advantage. Could they overcome that? Well, if you asked NBA experts to rank all of the players 1 through 50 or whatever in the league, I would have to guess that maybe more than 50% would have Donovan Mitchell number 1 on a list of Pacers and Cavaliers, but I don't know that that's definitive. I think Halliburton, Garland, Mitchell are all in, conversation for potentially best player of the series. And we haven't even named Pascal Siakam or Evan Mobley, who you never know. Jared Allen too could fit that mold also. So it's different in that there's not a top 5 player in the world in this series on either team, but 2 teams that are vastly better top to bottom than Milwaukee. And so for the Pacers, that's the biggest difference, is there's not this one, singular guy that gets all the focus, but Cleveland, I mean, their depth, both in terms of their stars, they have 4 all-stars on their team, but also they've got a couple of 6th man of the year candidates, and one of them he finished second, in Ty Jerome, but DeAndre Hunter was also right there. I mean, those are guys coming off the bench. So much, much deeper in terms of 1 through 8 or 9, much, much deeper in terms of their stars. They've got 4 legitimate stars on their team. And look, when you win 64 games and you have the most lopsided round 1 series in NBA history, you deserve to be the favorite. And there's no question Cleveland is the favorite. But the Pacers last year won 2 playoff series in which they were the underdog, in which they didn't have home court advantage. They surprised a lot of people. They've gained a lot of experience. They've won 3 series in each of the last 2 years. So Cleveland is the favorite. They should be the favorite. But the Pacers are good enough that if they play, their A brand of basketball, I think they've got a real shot in this series. And one of the most interesting, nuggets to me is the Pacers got off to this horrible start. They were 10-15 on December 8th. And from that date, if you go December 9 on, we're talking about January, February, March, April, over 4 months of basketball, almost 5 months of basketball. The Pacers have the 4th best record in the NBA over that time. They're 44-18, counting the playoffs. And they have the 4th best record in the league over that time. And the 2nd best record in the league over that time is Cleveland. So the Pacers have been close to as good as the Cavaliers over the last 5 months, not quite there, but closer. And so you can make a case that Indiana is playing like a team better than a 4 seed, and that this is maybe more like a 1 versus 2 or 3 type matchup here. But Cleveland, until proven otherwise, in my opinion, they deserved it from the regular season they've had, and they deserved it from the dominant first round performance that they had, is the prohibitive favorite. And for Indiana, it's an absolute must to take care of home court. You've only got 3 games if you can get there in this series. And look, I absolutely think the Pacers can steal 1 in Cleveland, but winning 2 in Cleveland is going to be really, really hard. So if you steal 1 in Cleveland, you've got to win all 3 of your home games. Well, The Pacers did that against Milwaukee. Last year, they did that against New York. Last year, they did that against Milwaukee. So they've done that before, but your margin of error is much, much slimmer than it was in the Bucks series. So my gut feeling is that the Pacers are going to give them a real run for their money and hopefully give themselves a chance to pull off the upset at the end. But I think absolutely that Cleveland deserves to be viewed as the favorite in this series, and they will be with home court advantage.
You know, Pat, it is interesting to see going into this series that both teams in very different ways have great depth, because the Pacers can go 8 or 9 players, can't they? And certainly Cleveland can, and their depth is, like, as you articulated very well. But I think that's been one of the strengths of the Indiana Pacers is on a given night, you have a star in Halliburton anchoring. Certainly Siakam is one of those really good A players that you want on your lineup, but you get so many good performances from a variety of other people that seem to show up as you would hope they would on different nights. I mean, Nembhard has evolved into a very good basketball player. So it's going to be an intriguing series. I look for it. I look for it to be very, very competitive. I'm just curious to see. You never know until the ball's thrown up in the air, do you, how the matchups are going to look. And when you get into a 7-game series, it's such a different animal than a one-off game during the regular season.
No question. And I think that depth comment is dead on. And to be honest, it's what gives me a lot of pause in terms of, the Pacers' chances in this series, just because Indiana is very deep. And typically when you're going into a playoff series, anyone that I have been a part of the last couple of years, and frankly, before earlier iterations of this team have been deep too, it's always been, okay, that's an advantage. Your depth is an advantage. Your bench is an advantage. Can you use that to your advantage? The Pacers have a very good bench and very good depth, but Cleveland does too. I mean, this is the first time that I can remember in a long time that's not a Pacers advantage going into a series. I'm not saying it's a disadvantage, but one of Indiana's biggest strengths is also one of Cleveland's biggest strengths. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And then also the Pacers have been a team that have taken great care of the ball, and they're great in the turnover margin, but they're not a good rebounding team. And so they made up for their lack of rebounding with their ability to turn teams over. And those two key possession stats have kind of canceled each other out. Cleveland, they play 2 twin towers, down low, and that rebounding category is going to be massive. And if the Pacers don't win it, they have to do a great, great job on the turnover. And they have to they're probably not going to win the boards in this series, but they've got to keep them from just being demoralizing numbers. They can't be out rebounded by 15 or 20 a game. They have to keep it somewhat close. And I think there's probably part of Rick Carlisle that would love to say, let's play some small ball, some Obi Toppin at 5, spread out the Cavaliers, make them chase us around the 3-point line. And I think that there could be a case made for that being an offense that could have a lot of success against Cleveland, but then the challenge becomes you're already smaller than them, and are you just going to get butchered on the glass? So I thought the Pacers matched up very well with Milwaukee. Cleveland is such a well-rounded team that it's hard to find the areas where the Pacers definitively can take advantage, but I think one of them's pace, if they can get up and down the floor, push the ball, keep Cleveland out of their half-court defense. That's an area where the Pacers, I think, could potentially exploit. But you don't win 64 games without being a complete team. You don't have that dominant first-round series without being a complete team. And the Cavs very much are a complete team. And the Pacers are going to have to find areas in the margins here or there to try to take advantage of. But I would say the margin for error for Cleveland is much higher than it is for Indiana. The Pacers can't really afford to have many stretches of poor play, or they can't afford to give up games at home. They've got to do all of their necessities well. And if they do that, I think they've got a very good chance. But Cleveland is a caliber of opponent that is a few steps higher than Milwaukee, I think.
What an exciting series it's going to be. Now, if I could just take a couple of minutes of your time. Tomorrow, you mentioned you're going to be doing the preseason game for the Indiana Fever. It's been almost bizarre I've used that word too much today. It's been somewhat surreal that we've had several months where all we're talking about is not Caitlin Clark. Like, it's been so quiet for such a long time. Everything in basketball was about Caitlin Clark. there have been little bits here and there where people have spoken up, some of it, a lot of it glowing, some of it negative because people are insanely jealous, I believe, is a lot of the motivation for any of the negative commentary. But you've got Caitlin back, but boy, Caitlin has a new team around her, doesn't she?
Yeah, it's wild to describe the difference in expectations around this team going into this year versus last year, because last year it was so thrilling to have Caitlin coming on board, but it was a team that missed the playoffs the year before, albeit took a nice step the previous year with Aaliyah Boston, the number one pick, before Caitlin, who's a foundational part of what the Fever are doing here. But last year it was just, oh my goodness, we have this mega star with this sensational following. How exciting is that? That's still very much true. But this year, the Fever coming into this, we had media day on Wednesday, the ability to talk to all the players. And the question I asked everybody who came through was, what are the 2025 Fever capable of? And nearly every single player answered it bluntly, saying winning a championship, holding the trophy up. And there's an important difference, in my opinion, between being in a position where it's championship or bust, where if you don't win a championship, it's a bad season. I don't want to speak for the players or the coaches, but to me, if the Fever don't win a championship next year, that's not a failure of a season in of itself. There typically are steps a team has to take, winning a playoff series or two before they get to actually win a championship. But for me, they have jettisoned themselves into the upper echelon, into the handful of teams that can consider themselves legitimate championship contenders. There's a few of them: New York, Vegas, Minnesota, Indiana. We'll see on a couple of other teams, like, could Phoenix maybe put something together with their totally revamped roster, maybe. But I would say those four teams immediately kind of jump out to me, and they're in the conversation. At bare minimum, they're in the conversation of some of the best teams in the league. And with their offseason acquisitions of Natasha Howard and of Dewana Bonner, and there are others too, which are key, but that gives the Fever a starting five with five players who have all made an all-star team in their careers. And so not many teams can do that, and not many teams can trot that out. So it's just wild to look at where this franchise was a couple of years ago when they were 5-31. And then last year, coming into the season of, this is a thrilling experience getting Caitlin Clark, but not really many actual on the floor expectations. And now it's a team that expects to make the playoffs, win playoff series, and contend for a championship. And all of that has happened very, very quickly, but it's been just a thrilling experience here so far. And as you noted, we kick off the preseason on Saturday, so that'll be our first look at the team. And then the regular season begins on May 17th. So it's right around the corner.
Wow, exciting. I had Yvonne Edgem on the show last week because Yvonne, hailing from Calgary, of course, being at Gonzaga, I hope she makes the roster. We'll see. I don't know where it stands right now. If she sticks with the organization, you have one of the great people in the world as part of it, who I think has a real upside. But we'll see. It's just really exciting that I was very happy for Yvonne that she was drafted in the third round by the Fever.
It's funny, when you called me, I'm actually sitting down and doing my prep, and I was actually in the middle of Yvonne as it was time to go into your conversation. Actually, I looked down and I said, oh, wait, this is when I'm supposed to be calling you. So I almost was a little late to our conversation because I was doing my prep on her. But, she is a great example, and I have no idea what's going to happen here. WNBA training camp is so difficult. Preseason is so difficult. There's limited spots, but she's a perfect example of hopefully where the league will be in a few years, and where, at least from a collective bargaining standpoint, it's not quite there yet. If this was the NBA equivalent, if the NBA equivalent of roster spots existed in the WNBA, I think she has a great chance at making the roster. If you look at the NBA, you can have 15 guys and then 3 two-way players. And if you look at the WNBA, you can have 12. And that's a massive difference, especially when you consider there's only 13 teams. So you're doing the math on 13 times 12 versus 30 times 18. I mean, the amount of players that make the NBA well more than double the amount that makes the WNBA. And look, the Fever drafted her because of her standout career at Gonzaga, as I'm sure you talked about, most points, most rebounds of all time in school history. So she's had a tremendous run, and the Fever will give a big look at her. And she's one of those players where I don't have to talk to the front office to know this. They wish they could keep her with all certainty, but there's just not enough roster spots to go around. And the equation becomes, it's always challenging for third round draft picks like she was. But that by no means is to suggest that she's not going to make it. I have no idea. When I look at the roster, there are 10 sure things to me. And then from there, I don't know. In the Fever, you can technically keep up to 12. You're now talking at a level that's a little above where I'm capable of, but there is there is a salary cap, and some teams can only keep 11 because of that salary cap. And I don't know if the Fever are in position to keep 11 or 12, frankly, but she'll get a good look. And I actually think she'll get a really good look on Saturday because the Fever are playing back-to-back preseason games, and the second game is on Sunday, and it's at Iowa City, and you know that they're going to want Caitlin and probably a lot of the starters to play in that one. So I actually think Yvonne could get a good look and some good minutes on Saturday, but we'll see. I'm excited to see her game. She obviously has a remarkable standout collegiate career, and for her and a handful of other players, these are tense moments where you're trying to prove it and earn your way onto a roster spot. And sadly, there's always more good players than there are roster spots. But at the end of the day, if she continues, to have success, albeit wherever it is around professional basketball, if it's in the U.S., if it's somewhere else, she'll get her chance. That almost always occurs if a player continues to play well. They'll get their chance. It's just about whether that happens now or whether that happens down the road. But I've been very impressed in the limited interactions I've had with her so far.
Very well stated and framed. And like you said, she'll get every opportunity. When I spoke with her, she's a very pragmatic, realistic young lady. She knows she may end up in Europe this year, but she's going to give it her all. And I agree with you. If not now, at some point, she'll get her shot if she continues down this path. She's so darn smart, like Caitlin, that she's going to go into medicine. So it's just a question of when. So not a question of whether she becomes a physician one day. So, well, exciting time. The Iowa City game should be so much fun. I mean, the Hawkeye State are going to just go insane having Caitlin back with the Fever. So that will not feel like a preseason game at all.
That's for sure. That's for sure. It's such a cool experience too. For me, we've experienced all of this love that has come from Iowa and gone east to Indianapolis. And so I'm really excited for us to be able to go west to Iowa. It's only been a year, but it feels like it's been so much longer than that. And we have just been just blanketed in so much support and love from that fan base, of Caitlin's fan base. It's hard to describe just how transformational it's been, for a WNBA franchise, not just to get a player of this caliber, but to get a star of this caliber, and just an unbelievable person, and an incredibly intelligent person too. But these fans who have followed her over her 4 years at Iowa and have come east to Indianapolis, and you should see an hour before a Fever game. I mean, there are 22 jerseys littered around Indianapolis like you would see 18 Peyton Manning jerseys or 31 Reggie Miller jerseys around this city. I mean, it's truly at that level already. And for those people, I am so excited that we are going to get to go west to them and get to come back to their backyard because they are so deserving of that. And even if it's just a preseason game, it's something that's a very, very cool opportunity for the Fever and, of course, for Caitlin to get to do.
Absolutely. Pat, you have been so generous with your time today. Thank you. Bottom of my heart. I always look forward to our conversations. This is a very thrilling time in Indianapolis, such a great sports city, but such a phenomenal basketball city. And now Pacers, Cavs, that's going to be great. WNBA, Fever, that's going to be wonderful. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to talking again real soon.
Yeah, it's always great to be on with you. Appreciate you giving me the time here, and maybe we'll check back in at some point midway through the WNBA season.
Looking forward to it, Pat. Pat Boylan, voice of the Indiana Fever and the Indiana Pacers, play-by-play voice, joining me here on the Basketball Show. We'll be right back after these messages. Pat, thank you so much.
Of course. Happy to come on. It was good to chat with you again. You do such a good job of just making it conversational. And I always look up and I'm like, man, I can't believe we talked that long.
I know. I'm the same way. I'm thinking that, man, we've been 40 minutes, but it could have been another
I know.
60. Easy.
I know.
Real
Very
easy.
Yep.
Appreciate
You do a great
it.
job. It's good to chat with you.
You too, Pat. Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.